Welcome to our Hangout on Air Display Auto Targeting for EDU. My name is Melissa Lane, and I am the Industry Development Manager for Google's education team. We work with our advertising partners to help them make the most of Google advertising solutions. And we know that the display network, the display conversion optimizer in particular, has had varying degrees in the EDU space. So we enlisted a group of Google product managers to take a look into what is really going on in these specific education campaigns. And two of them are here today to share what they have learned. Some new tips and some new best practices and new insights into how you can run better, smarter, and more successful display campaigns with Google. So let me introduce our presenters first. We have Joe Larkin. Hi, Joe. Joe is Google's global lead for display auto optimization. And second, we have Ale Oren. Hi, Ale. And Ale is Google's DCO product manager. And then as you can see, we also have some panelists in our Hangout as well today. These are four of Google's education advertising partners who are digital marketing experts with expertise as well in display and especially within the education space. So let me introduce each of them. I'll go along as I'm seeing you in the bottom. So first we have Dan Wilkinson. Hi, Dan.
Hi.
Dan is EVP at Jellyfish, which is an agency that works across advertisers across a variety of industries, including education. Next, we have Jessica Ray. Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
Welcome. Jessica is the Director of Display Advertising for Full Sail University. Next, we have Michael Flores. Hi, Michael.
Hello.
Michael is the Director of Search Marketing at Education Dynamics. And then last but not least, we have Rebecca Streeter. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello.
Hi. Rebecca is the Vice President of Interactive Marketing at Platform. So thank you so much, all of you, for being here. And thanks, everyone who is watching in the audience. Some quick housekeeping before we jump in. You'll see a Q&A app. If you don't see it on the right-hand side of your screen, you can click to expand it. Please type your questions there if you have any. And time permitting, we'll get to them either throughout the presentation or at the end. And if we don't get to address them, we will follow up on the event page afterward. And speaking of the event page, if you're interested in seeing a recording of this Hangout later, you can come back to the same page that you're watching right now. You can just bookmark it, and the recording will be there at the conclusion of the presentation. So with that said, I'll hand it over to Joe.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And thank you to our panelists for joining us and everyone who is watching on YouTube right now. So as Melissa mentioned, my name is Joe Larkin. I am the global product lead for our auto optimization suite, which includes Display Campaign Optimizer as well as Conversion Optimizer on the display network. And we are excited to talk about some of the new features that we have coming for DCO, as well as a lot of feedback that we've heard from you and a couple ideas we have to help you better manage your campaigns. So our agenda for today, we're going to start off just recapping the feedback that we've collected from you over the last couple quarters. And then we will turn it over to Ale to talk a little bit about how DCO fits into a broader display strategy, as well as to get a little bit more technical on how the product works. In the second half, we'll chat about one of the more frequent problems we've heard, which is lead quality with DCO. And then we'll wrap up with some best practices to help you better manage your campaigns. So starting off with feedback we've received from you, these are a lot of quotes that we have heard from clients over the last couple of quarters. And as you can see, they are distributed across a spectrum of how satisfied they are with the product. Starting off, we have, as part of an integrated display buying strategy that works through the funnel, we hunt and gather with Display Campaign Optimizer, sift and consider with Conversion Optimizer, and close with remarketing. On the other end of the spectrum, we set a lower CPA on DCO because lead quality never picked up the way we expected it to. Other clients have been very satisfied with it. DCO makes my life a lot easier. After you give it 60 days, it does great. But then we still come back to the recurring issue of some clients view lead quality as a major challenge. And the last two, One client found it to be the whole package, not only new audiences, but also which ads are working and which are not. And then finally, another quote from a client, DCO drives a lot of traffic and conversions, but many conversions aren't qualified. So it is a very broad spectrum, and the feedback that we hear very, very frequently with DCO specifically is that it does drive a high volume of conversions, and it is a great tool to bring in new audiences, but the quality of the leads is challenging. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at this lead quality issue and try to break it down and view it a little differently. We see there's being two types of conversions that you will get through AdWords. There are shallow conversions and deep conversions. The shallow conversions are the ones that you're likely tracking right now with conversion tracking. And they happen very quickly within the site, not a lot of engagement required. And they're just brief conversions such as filling out an online lead form, signing up for a newsletter, downloading a brochure. Those right now we're tracking with conversion tracking, and we're feeding that data to Display Campaign Optimizer and Conversion Optimizer. But the conversions that you really care about, the conversions that bring value to your business, are much deeper down the funnel. And those are providing additional information to your business over the phone, qualifying lead over the phone, users who submit a course application, or users who actually enroll in an online course and provide an actual value to your business. Those are the conversions you care about, but right now, those conversions aren't tracked online, and they're not fed into our optimization products, which is a double-edged sword. And what we've heard from you is that, yes, the shallow conversions are there, the deep conversions are not there. And over the last couple of quarters, you've seen a decline in conversion rate going down this funnel. We're still giving you conversions, but not the conversions that you care about. So we're going to throw it over to Isla in just a minute, but the presentation towards the end is going to dive much deeper into this lead quality issue, and then we'll chat about best practices to try to make sure that we're taking care of quality and making sure that we're driving volume. With that, I will turn it over to Isla.
Very good. Thanks, Joe. So again, if you have any questions, please just post them on the Q&A, and I'll try to answer them right away, or we'll save them for later and address them later. So let me explain a little bit first, very brief, how DCO works under the cover, what it actually does, and then paint a little bit of a bigger picture of how this could fit in overall display strategy. And just to start with that feedback that Joe started with, so if you like DCO because it saves time, that is good. That is actually one of our objectives. If you like DCO because it gives you good returns, CPA or ROAS or whatever you're using to measure, that's good. That's our objective. If you find it takes 60 days, that is not good, because we should do much faster. And so if it takes 60 days, get back to us. That's not good. And if you find you get bad lead quality, we have a solution, I think, and Joe will go into that, because that is actually the core of what we drive to optimize for you, is good leads that actually convert at a value that is useful to you. So let me explain a little bit of how DCO works. And so the reason we call it Display Campaign Optimizer, it does actually two things. It does auto-targeting, so finding the right audience for you, and it does auto-bidding, so deciding on the proper price to bid for you. And so the way it works, and so for some of you this may be completely clear, and for others completely new, so I'll just go briefly over it. You can look at our process as a continuous flow optimization in 4 phases. So the first thing we do is we try to learn from whatever settings you give us to understand a little bit about your campaign. So first we look at your landing page, we look at your creatives, and we look at any performance history that you have on your current campaign or your current ad group or in your account. And we basically try to figure out what are the right criteria to target for your campaign as we understand it. So we try to learn. Then we do lots of optimization behind the scenes to basically figure out which of the criteria that we could use for you, keyword criteria, user criteria, placements, which we think would perform well. So we try to predict basically click-through rates, conversion values, and we try to figure out which ones would work well for you. And then there is a huge prediction model going on there. We optimize that every day, and we try to basically figure out what would work for you. Then, when we actually try to enter into an auction, we also optimize the actual bid for you. So we optimize kind of real-time bidding. We optimize the price we paid for your impression, and we optimize also the targeting. So based on lots of signals that are going on in the auction, we decide to bid a little bit higher, a little bit lower, or to not bid at all in this specific auction. And then there is a feedback loop going. because then we track how those impressions are working for you. We track how they're converting or not. We track how they're being clicked on or not. And we basically feedback loop and try to expand. So basically, get rid of criteria that are not converting for you and expand new criteria that are working for you. And so the matching in general, just as a very broad, the way we do all these criteria optimization is both semantically relevant keywords or semantically relevant criteria, so something that seems or looks similar to what you're actually trying to achieve, and performance-based. So if you're targeting a specific part of, some education or interested users, we look both at semantically relevant placements where these people might show up, and we look at actual performance. And then,
Dale, sorry to jump in. How quickly does that process take place? One of the things that we're finding is when we can see success or failure in certain areas, like the speed that shift happens, that isn't always as quick as we would want that to happen.
Yes, that is an excellent question. And so there is a couple of things going on. In general, it takes, I would say, on average, about a week for us to pick up. The thing is, there is two things going on. So we have actually a lot of data, and sometimes we recompute every hour, sometimes we recompute every day what we think are good performance. So overall, we generally recompute every day, let's say on average. The question is, what is the window that we're looking at to recompute your performance? Because if you have, say, a very seasonal campaign, and you have an uptick or a downtick in performance in the last day, we actually see that, but it averages out if you compare it with lots of other traffic. And so we don't know if that is actually noise or if that actually signal because you changed something on your side, you introduced a new offer, whatever, or it's just noise in the system. So
that's a good point, and I think that is a challenge across all digital marketing, like the length of time or the amount of data that you need to look at to make the right decisions.
Yes, and so it's a very good point. We are aware. We are working on different solutions in that area, but it's tough. Like you say, it's tough. But in general, that's why I said in the very beginning, if you see it takes 60 days to get any improvement, that's too long, because it should take about a week usually. And we do want to get it faster for those campaigns where faster is more relevant, especially seasonal ones. Okay, any other questions right now off the bat? Or from the audience? Otherwise, okay. Let's move to the next slide then. So just remember, this is a continuous feedback loop, right? So a little bit of a way to think about it, I'm not sure if this helps or not. For me, it's useful. The way DCO works is basically it tries to find more conversions at an appropriate rate for yours, or appropriate CPA or CPC target. And so if you think about the audience that you would generally target, the closest ones are the ones you know very well. So remarketing audience. These are people that have been on your site, they have expressed clear interest, and so they are kind of an obvious target to remarket. And so usually the value you pay for them, the cost you pay for them is quite low to the value you get, because you're quite sure that they will convert. So you can do remarketing campaigns on them. That's excellent. Then the next layer, so to say, is where you manually basically derive what you think are known segments in the GDN, in the overall display network, where you find relevant audience. And so they're in a sense a straightforward expansion of what is going on. And then the next layer is where we go and we basically look for additional prospects or candidates where we think, based on a lot of data and a lot of performance history, we think these are actually likely candidates for visiting your site, for being interested, and then for eventually converting. But we don't know, right? So we try the best we can based on all your performance history. And I would say, on average, we do much better than you do manually for those visitors that you don't know about. So in the inner circle, you usually do much better than we, of course, because these are people you know, so they are not that hard to target, to be honest. But in the broad network, it's actually very hard to find the relevant people. And so we have a lot of data, or we try to use all the data we have to find them. And so if you, for example, would compare CPCs or CPA or your return on ad spend for your remarketing visitors versus your broad DCO prospects, that is not very fair. Because, of course, I can find you good candidates on that inner circle, but the inner circle is very small. So if you want to find more people, you need to pay a bit more because you don't know if they convert or not. So that is why, in general, obviously, on remarketing, you will have a better return. But then if you want to have more traffic, you need to pay more. And so what we try to do is we try to get you more traffic that is still at the best conversion rates or the best CPAs that we think we can find for you. And then if we don't do well, we need to improve. But usually it's not fair to compare, or it's not fair for you, it's not useful for you to compare your DCO returns on the general population versus your remarketing returns on your known visitors. Okay, and so then the final thing I wanted to say on the next slide is, in a way, the way to look at these three circles, if you want, is there is kind of a continuous, you can think about it as a funnel. There is kind of a continuous flow going on where you're looking for new prospects in the broad area, in the broad display network. You try to basically get them interested, lead them to your site or lead them to impressions where they get interested. And once you figure out that they're in market, so they're actually interested to buy, or they're interested to convert, or they're interested to sign up, or whatever you want to do, you try to target them contextually on whatever they're visiting at that point in time. And then once you get them to your site, or you get them interested, you try to remarket them and convert them to actual students, or whatever conversion is for you. And so, in a sense, there is this notion of a cycle where you find new people, you try to get them more interested, retarget them, and then remarket them, and then go back up.
And then in the first slide where you said all of the data that you use for the learning,
yeah,
like that diagram, those three areas is really cool. So does like the remarketing data and the manual data, is that all incorporated in the learning for the DCO campaigns?
Yeah, so let's move one slide back. It's a very good question. One more slide. Yeah. So there's two things going on here in terms of learning. So the very left of the picture is, in a sense, the bootstrapping, where we start. And so we start from whatever we have. And so it's your site, it's history if you have history. It's, for example, your remarketing user list. We use that kind of information. Then at the very end, there is a feedback loop. And so the feedback loop uses all signals that we can find. So it uses all the performance signals that we can find on your campaigns, on your ad groups, on your creatives. And so, for example, we do use your manual criteria also as a bootstrap. So on the learning part, if you tell us, this is manually where I think keywords that should be targeted, we use that as a bootstrap. We of course look at your exclusions. So if you tell us don't target this placement because whatever, for legal reasons, policy reasons, I just don't want to be there, of course we look at that. If you give us demographics, so I'm only interested in males, I am only interested in 25 to 35-year-olds because the rest is not in market for studying, for example, we look at that. So we take that into consideration, and then we improve on that basically with the feedback loop. Does that answer your question, then?
Yeah, I have a question real quick.
Yes, it did.
On the learning and target phases of this, does it go beyond learning on just the landing page or the URL that the campaign is attached to? So does the system go to, say, the school's website versus just the content that the campaign is attached to?
So do you mean does it crawl the rest of that site apart from the specific landing URL?
Correct.
Or do you mean,
correct.
I'm not 100% sure. What do we do? It depends a bit. I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
Other questions? No? Okay. Then let's move on. We lost Rebecca there, I guess. So Joe, you want to move?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Al. So before we hop into lead quality solutions, wanted to take a brief pause and check in with a couple of panelists and figure out how you've been using DCO in your display strategy and your experiences with DCO. So, hey, Michael, just to start with you, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about how you've used DCO and how you view it in your display strategy.
We haven't used DCO for some time. My overall instruction to our Google teams is to not talk to me about DCO. I worked on various versions of it from when it was in alpha at other companies, and we tested it a couple of times here, and we've never had any luck with it, and I don't know, we don't use it at all.
So across our portfolio, we've had some campaigns and some verticals that similar, just haven't worked. And then on other campaigns and verticals, and even in education, we have seen examples of where it can be successful. And I think the biggest thing for us is getting the right mix between those three circles. So it was good to see that diagram. So how can you, in a wider marketing mix just on display, how can you utilize each of those different areas? What's the right mix of all of those things so that you are getting the real targeted, the remarketing, bringing them back in. Manually, you're selecting either placements or segments or topic, interest, categories, or lookalike segments because you know that they work. And then we do have a percentage of our campaigns that are on DCO just to see what else we can bring in. And then we kind of have a look at that information, and sometimes we can move some of the stuff that we're seeing from DCO into our manual targeting ring. So that's kind of how we're at a tactical level, how we're using DCO within our portfolio.
So I think I had the exact opposite experience as Michael did, as we ran DCO over the last 3 years, 2 or 3 years, with amazing success. Somewhere along the lines in January, DCO became extremely volatile for us. So campaigns that were performing steadily, that we had counted on spending significant amount of our budget, just stopped working. First it was one, and then it was another one, and then it was another one. So at this point, after attempting to reboot those campaigns per se, they've never come back to where they were. They'll spend, but they will no longer convert like they had been converting. So we have started to just scale back tremendously on the amount of money we're putting into it, because it's just not coming at the CPL. You had mentioned the quality. So the lead quality had always been an issue, but because the cost per lead was significantly lower, we could make those metrics work. But now that cost per lead is exceeding the other cost per leads within GDN, it just doesn't make any sense for us.
And Michael and Dan, just to clarify, when you two said that you both had experiences using DCO and that it hasn't worked for you, what specifically were you using to gauge success? Was it that it wasn't driving volume, or it wasn't driving conversions, or it wasn't driving quality?
A mixture of quality and actual CPL.
On our manual targeting stuff on the GDN, we can generate quite a large volume of conversions at excellent prices with our manual targeting, and DCO's never come close to our manual targeting on cost per conversion. So I mean, it's probably off by a factor of 100. It's been very poor for me every time I've ever tested it, and you know, the lead quality is just not there anyway. If we were to just want to go out and get poor quality leads, we could do so at a greater volume and substantially better economics using manual targeting.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. And Rebecca, do you have anything to add regarding your experiences with DCO or part of your display strategy?
Sure. I mean, our experiences have been mixed, to be honest with you. And we've had some very positive experiences where we've been able to get very low cost per leads and very good volumes. On the other end, we've had experiences where we've experienced similar to what Jessica was talking about, where it's been very volatile and not been able to really depend upon it for steady volume. One of the things that continues to come into play for our clients is concern over making sure that whenever we're using DCO, that we are using targeting that would be ensuring brand compliance as well. So I don't know if you guys could talk a little bit to that also, but how when we're automatically doing the targeting and not manually doing the targeting, how can we ensure brand compliance within the network?
Actually, that's a great point, Rebecca. From our standpoint, we have a very strong compliance department, and if we have advertisements for some of our sites that are coming up on what might be considered objectionable sites or sites that have not illegal, but we don't want to be associated with some of the messaging around these sites. I'm sure everybody on this panel has seen things with pictures of the president and I don't know, mountains of money falling from the sky and so forth. Those are going to be potential compliance issues for us. So on a normal basis, we can just go in and ask to have those sites not show up with our GDN campaigns. But with DCO, it's much more of a crapshoot, I think, in my experience, as to where you're going to show up. And it's not that you couldn't stop it, right? It's just that the added overhead from our standpoint, from a compliance side, was just another factor. I had actually forgotten about that, but like I said, it's a great point you raised.
I think brand compliance and just having control where you're showing is very valuable feedback. And let's, if it's all right, come back to that at the very end of the presentation. We have a couple sections to roll through in the next 20 to 30 minutes, but let's come back to brand compliance towards the end.
Maybe just give me 5 seconds to just reply to a couple of things that people mentioned, and also some of the questions I'm seeing, because I think we can answer them quickly. So one question I saw there from Sean, does offline conversion tracking influence DCO? It definitely does. We'll go into what offline conversion tracking does and how it helps you. So that answer is yes. Second question, should I segment my campaigns by OS, etc.? We'll get to that a little bit at the very end, but otherwise we'll come back to this one because it's a good question. So should you set up your campaigns? How many should you have basically hanging? How many ad groups or how many campaigns to allow DCO to optimize properly? And then a couple of things to come back to from our panelists. So thanks again for your feedback. Michael, I'll get in touch because a factor of 100 is just wrong. So we'll get in touch. This is just wrong. We should definitely be doing better. So either something is wrong on your side in terms of conversion tracking or conversion reporting, or just we messed up, but it's wrong.
I mean, I could tell you from our experience, we would go through the sites where we were showing, and there was just, I understand that DCO is trying to kind of hunt for people that don't have, let's say, a keyword link, right? And that's something that we would be able to target ourselves. But the quality of the sites themselves, that in my experience anyway, other panelists can speak for themselves, was so poor and so distant from. I think that all of us on the panel probably think of ourselves as being purveyors of, if not premium products, in some cases very expensive products, and that there's just a massive distance between the person that you're imagining would frequent some of these websites, the person who would be undertaking a decision to make a massive investment in the tens or thousands or greater in terms of their education. And a factor like that might be something where, even if there were all these signals that the black box was saying, oh well, I think I can follow this, I think I can follow this, I just don't see somebody who's playing on a paper doll site very likely to undertake a potentially expensive educational product.
Yeah, fair. Which is why it shouldn't show up there probably. So there is something wrong. Then Jessica, as you said, volatility around January, declining returns, fair point, which we know about, and we have worked actually quite hard over the last 6 months to actually reduce volatility a lot, improve performance. So we know about the issue. It has been an issue, and we actually have lots of stuff coming up to actually further reduce volatility and improve performance, because it's very, it's actually scary to have very volatile performance. So you don't want that. Then Dan, coming back to your point, I think you raise a bigger question about these three circles in general. What you want across your campaigns, across display, is proper attribution modeling of, you know, what is happening in different parts of the funnel, so to say. How are people converting down the line from a very first brand type like impression to a actual conversion, shallow to a deeper conversion? And we have some, I think we have some material on that also later on, but it's a general point on how to do proper attribution modeling, and it's difficult. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention those couple of things.
Excellent. And we'll definitely follow up after the presentation. It sounds like there are a couple issues that would be better to pursue after the presentation. We can definitely follow up with you guys. So in the second half, we wanted to tackle the issue of lead quality and just ensuring that we're optimizing off of the right data. And the first new solution that's come out in the last quarter is called Target Return on Ad Spend. And we're really excited about this because it actually gives us a much better metric to optimize off of and does a much better job driving value for your business. With Target Return on Ad Spend, you tell us what your ROI target is with AdWords. So you would say, I want $2 returned to my business for every dollar I spend, and we will manage your CPC bids within that target to try to deliver that revenue goal. Just to take a step back and look at how this actually stacks up to our current options, our real-time bidding suite is composed of Enhanced CPC, Target CPA, and now Target ROAS. So with Enhanced CPC, you are still setting a maximum cost per click bid in the UI, and we use your conversion data to flex that bid up or down depending on the probability of converting. And we will go 30% higher than your max CPC, or all the way down to 0 if we think that the impression has absolutely no chance of converting. This is ideal to improve your probability of conversion, but it does not actually consider value, and it treats all conversions the same. Target CPA goes a little bit farther down the path. Instead of setting a max CPC bid, you tell us what your target is, and you'll say, I want to pay $10 for every conversion. And we will fully manage your CPC bids within that target, increasing your CPC bid at the time of the auction if it has a great chance of converting, and decreasing it with a lower chance of converting. Again, we do rely on the conversion tracking data here, but we are flexing your CPC bid to try to fit the predicted conversion rate. ROAS goes farther down the pipeline, and we take value from your conversion tracking data, and we try to predict the actual value of the ad impression. So instead of just looking at the probability of conversion, we're looking at the probability and potential value. And we flex your CPC bid at the time of the auction to fit that prediction. So instead of just trying to drive conversion volume, we're trying to drive conversion value. And again, this does rely on conversion tracking data, and it does rely on passing values through conversion tracking, but it's a really powerful tool to actually manage ROI targets instead of just CPA targets. To take a look at how ROAS would actually work for an EDU client, it's a pretty self-explanatory case for e-commerce, but for EDU, the conversions are completely different. A lot of the conversions first happen online, and then the rest occur offline. Your first conversion is someone just filling out the lead form online, which is likely most of the data that we're optimizing off of right now. But you'll immediately call that client to actually verify that they are indeed interested. That takes place offline and is not connected with the click and is not passed back to AdWords. Then they might submit a course application, which is worth much more money to the business. But again, we don't actually get that data. And then lastly, enrolling in the course, which is the true value to the business and carries a much, much higher revenue than any of the other conversions. With Target Return on Ad Spend, you're actually passing this data back to us, and at the time of the impression, we're weighting the probability for each of these conversions to occur, and then bidding appropriately. So instead of just bidding to get people to fill out lead forms, we're bidding to try to get people to enroll in courses. And when we go back to DCO, when we're informing our targeting, instead of just trying to drive those shallow conversions, we have a holistic view, and we're trying to drive actual revenue for the business. So we're trying to find placements and audiences that have a high probability of enrolling in the course, not just passing shallow conversions. The second feature that we're really excited about is offline conversion tracking. And this, again, has come out in the last quarter, and is designed to supplement Target ROAS. I'm guessing the question after the last slide was, it's great in theory, but how do we actually get all of that data to you? Because a lot of that data is happening offline. So right now, when we consider conversion tracking, the only conversions that we care about are conversions that happen online. The lead form that's filled out online, the brochure that's downloaded online, a view of a key page, all that data is tracked in the AdWords interface, collected with conversion tracking, and then passed to our optimization tools. What we want to start getting at is the offline conversions. So all of these conversions happen offline. Qualifying leads over the phone, filling out course applications, actually physically enrolling. These don't happen online and are not actually connected with a conversion tracking snippet. What we're trying to do with offline conversion data is take these conversions that happen offline that you're tracking on your end and that you're using to manage bidding and budgets and targeting on your end and pipe them into the online interface. So the way that the AdWords import works is you measure these conversions offline up to 90 days after the click. You track them on your end just as you would any normal conversion, and then import them into AdWords through the API or through a feed. So you're tracking all the conversion data on your end and then passing it back to us. We're associating the conversion data with the click that actually drove that conversion, and then using that to inform our algorithms that actually drive Conversion Optimizer and DCO, so that we have a much more holistic view when we're bidding and when we're targeting. This is going to allow us to actually identify high-value clicks versus low-value clicks, and high-value placements versus low-value placements.
And what's being used as that link? Is it the creative ID, the CID?
It's a really good question. So it's actually a click ID. When you turn on offline conversion tracking, we append a click ID to the end of the destination URL that gets passed through to your landing page. And then that click ID, presumably when someone actually fills out an application or makes their first conversion online, is tied in your CRM or in your offline data collection. And any conversion that happens after that, you're just logging, and it's eventually tied back to that click ID. So when you pass us the data, we're using the click ID as a linchpin to tie it back to all of our systems.
And how do you judge, this gets more into, I think, the nitty-gritty of it, is how would you judge what a good lead was, or, there's multiple different statuses. I can speak for myself, is that there's probably 100 different statuses a particular student can have. Is that something we would need to build out as this is good, this is bad, this is indifferent?
Sure, that's a good question, and you can go about it one of two ways. One is you can only really worry about the deepest conversion possible, and whatever the end goal is for that student, whether it's enrolling or whatever brings value, you can add that value to the offline conversion and pass it back to us. And we tie that value back to the click. Or you can update it on more of a recurring basis, so you can develop a value system for each state of the student and update that value within the offline data and pass it back to us on a daily basis, and we'll continue to update our algorithms based on the values that you're giving us. But we are effectively asking you to weight the conversion types and determine the value of each conversion type if it doesn't have an explicit revenue add for your business. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Excellent.
And is that just by conversion type? So lead will have one value, application will have a value, and enrollment will have one value. Because I know a lot of educators have a range of courses from certificates through to undergrad, graduate programs, PhDs, which all have different values and profitability and everything.
Mm-hmm. You can use
aggregated.
Yep, so you can use one or many different conversion types. Ultimately, we aggregate all the data. What we care about is the value that is ultimately tied back to the click. The conversion type, whether you have the conversion action specified as a lead or as a form submission, becomes somewhat irrelevant down the road because we aggregate all the data. And when we're making our prediction for what is the value of that impression, we're doing it as an aggregate of all the conversions that have occurred and all the conversion types. What we really care about is the value. The rest of it is more from a reporting perspective. So if you wanted to log into AdWords and see revenue broken down by conversion type, then you can use a lot of different conversion types, and we'll break it down for you.
So Joe, maybe to add also to this question from Dan. So you're free to do whatever you want on the spectrum, right? So you can report different conversion values for very different courses, and a PhD might be worth more to the educational institute than somebody who just takes an online stats course. So you can report different conversion values for that, and we will try to optimize differently for those different values. The trade-off that is difficult to make, also for us and also for you, is if you make it more finely granular, we understand better what is going on, but then we have usually less traffic per conversion type. And so it's harder to optimize because we have less traffic. If you bundle it all together, we have more traffic, but we actually don't understand the differences that are within that traffic. So if you'll have, let's say, usually 30 conversions a month for the PhD course and 30 conversions a month for the stats course, and they are completely valued differently for the educational institute, it makes sense to separate them out. If you have altogether maybe 15 conversions a month, it doesn't make sense to split them out because you just won't have enough traffic for us to learn from.
Yeah. We can definitely tackle a couple more questions about ROAS and offline conversions towards the end. We'll do a quick review of best practices and then open it back up to questions. So best practices, and the reason we want to put these together is because we frequently see issues where performance volatility can definitely come about organically, but a lot of the campaigns that we end up troubleshooting on our end, we see volatility arise out of changes or mismanagement, and a lot of times where we see DCO campaigns decline over time just come out of small changes, tweaks made to the campaign that ultimately have a net negative effect. So when you're first setting up the DCO campaign, a few rules just to keep in mind. One is to use fewer ad groups, and this goes back to the point that I'll just made about the volume of data that we have. When we're building our prediction models for DCO and for CO, we want to do it at the ad group level. And if you create a DCO campaign that has 50 ad groups, and each ad group only gets one conversion a month, we really don't have a lot of data to actually go out and find the right placements and find the right audience for you. So making sure that you have much more tightly themed ad groups is going to go a long way to helping DCO take off initially. The second point is just to keep one display URL for ad group. We try to get as specific with our modeling as possible, so we ideally build it down to the display URL level. And if you have one display URL per ad group, it makes the model as specific as possible. And it also ensures that all the conversions occurring within that ad group are given to one model as opposed to them being split. The other two in this bucket are a little more straightforward. So standard ad delivery, we see a lot of campaigns set to accelerated delivery, which can definitely understand doing that, but with DCO you run the risk of exhausting the budget way too early in the day, and it prevents DCO from actually having the whole day to explore, to find the right segments, and going back to what Isle said, the feedback loop to actually start learning on the fly, it really limits its ability to explore. And fourth is the ad rotation settings. You have optimized for clicks, optimized for conversions, rotate evenly. What we really want to focus on is having them optimized for conversions, because we want to make sure that your ad delivery settings are in line with DCO, which is trying to drive conversion volume and conversion value. And lastly is just be patient in the setup process and letting DCO take off. As I'll mention, the learning period, it can take a week for it to adapt to changes, and it can take a full week for it to ramp up. So avoid making a ton of changes in the first few days, and give it a chance to actually learn and explore before you start worrying about tweaking CPAs or changing ad text. In terms of the creatives, the biggest one in here is rotating in new ads gradually. We see a lot of campaigns suffer because very high-performing creatives are deleted and new ones are added. And this can have a very negative effect on quality score short term, and if the new creatives don't perform well out of the gate, we'll see them suffer for low quality score for a while, and it hurts DCO's ability to remain competitive. So whenever you're bringing in new creatives, new ads into the ad groups, make sure you're giving them a few days to run alongside the old ones, and then pause the old ones instead of deleting them. That way, if you ever want to restore the old ones, you can go back to those old ads and back to the click-through rate and the quality associated with those old creatives. Outside of that, feel free to use multiple different ad formats. Using text, image, multiple different ad formats unlocks a lot of inventory on the GDN. Different sites have different requirements for the ads they accept, so the more formats you use, the more GDN inventory you're opening up for DCO to explore. And if you are ever creating a new ad group, the right time to do it is when you have a completely different theme, a different product or a different service that you want to advertise for, a completely different set of creatives. That way, as DCO builds its model at the ad group level and learns at the ad group level, it's doing so with one creative theme and one message in mind. In terms of bid management, this goes back to positioning DCO as part of a whole display offering, is that we need a realistic CPA and ROAS target. Holding DCO to a search CPA or even to a remarketing CPA can be unfair because it's going out there and trying to find users and placements that you wouldn't otherwise find. And it's bringing in new customers. So giving it a little bit of a higher CPA or slightly lower ROAS target to actually go out and explore and serve as a new customer acquisition tool is going to give it a lot more bandwidth. Wait 1 to 2 weeks in between bid changes. As I'll mention, it can take up to a week for it to fully adapt to changes. So if you're constantly changing the CPA on a daily basis, it's going to severely limit DCO's ability to learn and adapt to what's happening in the market. And lastly, using bid to control traffic. A lot of times DCO campaigns will plateau. They'll hit a point where they're bringing in the same volume of conversions, the same volume of impressions. At that point, assuming that you are not using all your budget, your target CPA and your target ROAS bid is your lever to increase or decrease traffic. If you raise the CPA, you're going to give DCO more bandwidth to explore and drive more conversions and more value. If you lower the target, it is going to bring down traffic immediately. So once you hit that point of stability, your bid is really your lever to increase or decrease traffic, conversions, and value. And just as part of the ongoing process, leverage DCO as a new customer acquisition tool. It is there to feed your display funnel, to bring in users, to build your marketing lists. So view it as an ongoing tool to continually bring new visitors into the site and to continually drive value for your business. The second point is to monitor uplift across all channels. Because DCO sits at the higher end of this funnel, it is not always going to get credit for the conversions that it brings in, especially since AdWords uses a last-click attribution model. A lot of times DCO will bring a new visitor into your site, you'll retarget them with a remarketing ad, they'll convert, and your remarketing campaign will get credit, whereas DCO will look like it hasn't done anything. In reality, DCO has a significant impact on the rest of the display funnel and even the search funnel. So if you're thinking of testing DCO, or if you are running DCO right now, continue doing it in a controlled fashion, where you turn on a DCO campaign and really monitor the impact, the change in impressions and conversions across your other targeting criteria, and then shut off DCO for a week and check to see what happens. There should be a very big connection between what's happening in your KCT, your remarketing campaigns, and what's happening in DCO. And the very last point is just manual optimization. A lot of people view DCO as a total autopilot. As I'll mention, it is a auto-targeting tool. It is a real-time targeting tool. It is still subject to the constraints of market pressure and quality score, and does need some routine maintenance. So just going and making sure the creatives are performing well, considering introducing new creatives over time, making sure that your CPA is still competitive. Keep an eye on the campaign every couple weeks just to make sure it's still running smoothly.
How do you suggest manually excluding or optimizing the campaign with, I think, if you go back real quick, the fourth point was not to pause high-performing placements, but if those high-performing placements aren't either brand safe or the campaign is having really bad quality issues, and you can tell by looking at the site that this is where my leads are coming from, but it is something that either has nothing to do or it's spammy or the quality isn't there. So how do you counterbalance those two?
Definitely. Al threw his hand up like he wanted to say something.
Yeah, I think the question is, or the answer is simple. So if it's not satisfying your brand policy, exclude it. So monetary value might be high on that site because we think it's good, but if you don't want it, exclude it. So it's high performing in terms of money, but if you don't want it, then take it out. And then your other question is there a way, or also coming back to, I guess, to Michael's and Rebecca's question, is there a way to basically automatically have us filter out all these kind of dirty sites instead of needing to go in manually and excluding all these placements that you don't like? Right now, I think not, but I'm actually checking for you. But I think there is no way. But of course, you can go in and manually exclude them. But what I heard you guys asking for is there a way to basically say, can we do a safe browsing feature, like don't display this on weird sites, which we don't do right now. Let me anyway also get back to a couple of other questions I'm seeing on the side. And then Jessica, you sounded like you had more questions, but give me 1 second. So first one, you asked, a while back you asked, are we crawling actually more stuff from the site than just a landing URL? So right now we don't. We just take the landing URL. We use some other signals from the site, but we don't actually go and crawl rest of the site. So we need to have relevant stuff at the landing URL in general. Then some other question I saw, which I think is a good question, so I just wanted to make it publicly. So does DCO, with this picture of the circles, how does DCO kind of cannibalize or not on my existing manual KCT campaigns? So it's a good question. If you give us manual criteria or manual KCT campaign, and then you turn on automation on top of that, or you put in another campaign next to it, we usually cannibalize that traffic because DCO is a little bit better usually, except for those weird cases that Michael mentioned. Usually we are a bit better in terms of optimizing your bids. And so we take your manual criteria as a starting point and we optimize around them. So what you usually see if you have two campaigns that are targeting similar criteria, one is manually run and the other one is optimized by us, is the DCO campaign will usually increase traffic at the cost of the manual campaign. But we're actually finding the same leads. So there is nothing bad with that. It's kind of a management overhead for you that you have still two campaigns running, because in reality there is only one that is active because we will win most bids compared to your other manual campaign. So yes, we do cannibalize on the traffic, but it's because we're actually taking your criteria and learning from them.
And one quick follow-up, Jessica, on your question about manually excluding the placements. If you don't want to sort of add to those placements, definitely exclude them. What we don't want to have happen as a long-term strategy is to continually take the best placements that DCO finds and just move them as manual targeting criteria to other campaigns. As a short-term strategy, it is a great way to find which parts of the GDN you might not know about and to manually target it. But as a long-term strategy, you're taking what DCO is learning is working and completely pulling it out. So as you pull that out, it's going to really hurt DCO's ability to figure out what works in the future and also to continue to hit your CPA goals. So as a long-term strategy, it definitely challenges DCO. As a short-term strategy, if all you're doing is looking for a few more placements, it can definitely work. So just to wrap up, and then we have one more question for the panel. So 3 takeaways from today. For those of you that are concerned about value, about lead quality, about performance consistency, start using target return on ad spend and offline conversions to actually give DCO and Conversion Optimizer the data to optimize properly. 2 is to continually review DCO performance on incremental leads on top of search and remarketing campaigns. So like I said, don't just view DCO in isolation. Turn on DCO and monitor the impact that it has on KCT, on remarketing, on search traffic, and then shut it off. And that way you have an idea of the incremental uplift that a DCO campaign can provide to net conversions, to search campaigns, and to display campaigns. And lastly is just to set realistic targets. Give DCO time to optimize, give it a week or 2 weeks to learn, and then tweak it and prune it as you go along. One final question for the panel, since we are down to the last few minutes. Something that Isla and I were hoping to get from you is if you had one feature request for DCO, something that you have always wanted DCO to do that it doesn't do, what would that be for us to take away?
Transparency.
Transparency is definitely a big one.
And transparency on what? On criteria, on performance, on...
It would just... there's no point clarifying, because you're not going to give me the magic sauce. I'm just interested to understand. So, what is the percentage swing that's available? Because one of the things that we concentrate on a lot is if you have a finite budget, how do you make sure that you allocate your budget to the most successful areas of the campaign? And when you relinquish that control to DCO, is Google, are you guys making the best decisions on our behalf? Like, if there was one placement, like we switched to ROAS, DCO is working amazingly. We switched to the ROAS model. We've got enrollment. We're managing to enrollments, and everything is working well. But there is one placement that is outperforming everything else. Will we end up assigning 100% of that budget 100% of the time to that one placement?
Okay, heard you loud and clear. It's a
that
well-known...
can happen. I've seen that, where 90% of my budget ends up on one site.
Okay.
From my perspective, what I would love to be able to do is actually manage individual ad group budgets, because now the DCO is on the ad group level rather than the campaign level, I see where one ad group will just suck the entire budget out, leaving nothing left for anyone else. So if you add those additional ad groups, they're just pointless because you have one ad group out of the 5 that just spends the entire budget before any of the other ones can even have a chance to begin.
Makes perfect sense. And lastly, Michael, who has not used DCO in a few years, your big feature request?
Actually, I was thinking about something when you were talking about ROAS and target CPA and stuff. Why are you guys phasing out max CPA? I like max CPA way more than target CPA.
I like guaranteed CPA.
Yeah.
No, I mean in all seriousness, I feel like max CPA is just from a conceptual standpoint. Max CPA is the best way that an advertiser can get leverage on their campaigns. If when you ask us for target CPA, you're asking us to put a limit on what we'd be capable of spending with Google, we'd be capable of investing with you guys, based on completely arbitrary criteria, right? If we could make, for sake of argument, between 0 and 1 pennies per click, I think that anyone who's sophisticated would buy as many clicks as they possibly could at 0 to 1 pennies if they had a limitless budget. But if you ask us for target, you say, well, we have to pick an amount of money that we want to make, and this is how much we'd be willing to spend. And I think that conceptually, I think max is where I'd rather be. Oftentimes we have Google reps saying, no, if you switch to target, you're going to get more volume. And I guess that's like true if max and target have the same technology. Target's just actually setting a higher number than max. But max, you can, if you have a strong understanding of how your business works and your conversion rate and so forth. Personally, I just my feature request is to bring back the old feature and to unenhance campaigns in general. I find the enhancement of enhanced campaigns to be a mislabel in many ways.
I definitely agree with the transparency on how we're setting bids with target max CPA, and totally hear you on the feedback. And I would stay tuned for the types of bidding options that we have in the pipeline. And
the ability to eliminate tablets.
Yeah. These are great feature requests, slightly outside of the scope of DCO. But we have 1 minute left, so I'm going to throw it back over to Melissa to wrap up for us.
Thanks, Joe. So we just have about a minute left. I just want to say quick thank yous to Joe and to Ale for your presentation and your expertise. To all of our panelists, your honest opinions and feedback have made this hour much more valuable for us and for all of our viewers as well. So thank you so much for participating. And to our viewers, thank you for all of the questions. We'll address as many as we can as soon as possible at the conclusion of this presentation on the event page that you're on right now. So check back if you didn't get your question answered. And if you have a Google account team, please continue to talk to them on questions and follow-up and next steps to continue this conversation. So with that, thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.